Alright guys, I've got a cool video for you today because I'm covering an upcoming MMORPG that's been flying under the radar since the dev team started working on it back in 2017. And when I say under the radar, I pretty much mean unheard of, but I'm hoping to change that here, and this game is called Defend the Night. Now, I've spent some time both talking to the developers and looking into the game myself, and aside from what looks like really impressive visuals from an indie MMO from a small studio, there are a handful of features that this game boasts that have made me want to follow the development closely. Now I'm gonna jump into the specifics of what this game offers compared to other MMOs in a moment, but I just want to mention, if you guys are looking for regular MMORPG content, say no more, I've got you covered. My goal is to give you guys informative MMO content while being my normal dumbass self, so if that sounds like your cup of tea, hit that subscribe button. Alright, so Defend the Night, let's jump in. This video will be broken up into me giving you guys a rundown of what Defend the Night is aiming to be, where it's at currently, and lastly an interview with the developers to further understand the specifics of the game and what kind of experience you guys can look forward to. Okay, so let's start off with this quote just to give you guys some peace of mind. Is this just another shameless cash grab or a clone of an existing MMORPG? To which the developers respond, the term pay to win fills us with as much dread as it does our fans. Hooray, don't hear that too often. Okay, so first off, us MMO players have been looking for a new MMO experience for a long time, and they are becoming more and more rare, so this is how Defend the Night first caught my eye. Upon scouring the web, I didn't find much on the game until the developers released this flashy new site. Under the frequently asked questions and the about section, the game boasts to bring the best elements of classic MMORPGs together with the inclusion of features we find in modern MMOs as well, because as we know, the MMOs of old have plenty of strengths and weaknesses, and so do the modern MMOs, so at the forefront of the dev team's mind is what seems to be a best of both worlds incorporation. For instance, one thing that's a staple in both old and new MMOs is the nasty questing grind to get anywhere in an MMO. And the developers headline one of their main goals as the desire to be rid of this stale grind, and instead push events in the world as the main source of XP gains. On top of this, 11 classes will be available to choose from, all of which have an association with the old school MMO style of a tank, healer, DPS, and crowd controller. 11 classes, that's sick. That's a lot of variety, and I feel like unless it's coming from a bigger studio, you usually don't see MMOs nowadays say they're pushing for 11 classes at release. Now, as part of the old school vibe, Defend the Night isn't supporting the idea of an all-around class, so your class is your class, and there's not a lot of room outside of it to do what other classes may be capable of. I personally like this because it'll be nice to return to the roots of MMOs like LOTRO and WoW, where you create a character knowing you have a specific purpose, and you know you're going to be spending your avatar's little virtual life training to be the best DPSer, or tank, or healer, or what have you that you can be. As a result of this, according to the FAQs, there will be classes that are capable of soloing the game, and some that will require more assistance than others due to the nature of their abilities, which I'm guessing is going to be the Cleric, Enchanter, and Druid, as they all fall under the support classes. In other words, Defend the Night will be a largely community-driven experience. This fact was more and more apparent as I continued to look into the game. Defend the Night is incorporating a lot of events into the world to create varied gameplay. When you think of an event, you think of lots of people coming together for something. In Defend the Night, that something is player-owned city sieges and defenses, as well as various PvE events outside of dungeon crawling, questing, and raiding, but those PvE events have not been discussed in detail yet. Furthermore, it sounds like players will have a literal impact on the landscape of the world. I'm referring to this quote from the site's FAQ, which says there will be player-created and modified environments. I addressed this point in the developer interview section of the video we'll be getting to soon, and listen to how dope this sounds. Players will have the option to form their own homestead, progress to a town, and possibly even a full city. I'm guessing possibly means they aim to accomplish this feature in the dev cycle, but they're not sure if they have the time yet. Anyways, players will be able to create a community, become a citizen or ruler of that city, set up wares, establish local storefronts, and manage the defenses, and even establish a guild in that city. Damn, that's a lot of cool shit! Goose is intrigued, and I hope you are too. Now, I get this addressed more in detail once again in the developer interview, but how cool is it that this is a thing? Now, it remains to be seen, obviously, how in-depth this will be, but I don't think I know any other MMO that has had a full-blown system of running essentially what is your own mini-kingdom with a bevy of additions so you can create a society on top of that, while also going out into the rest of the world for a full-blown MMORPG experience. It's a cool thing to me that, at its its heart, Defend the Night is sticking to character development of classic MMOs, yet it's offering players the freedom of modern-day sandbox MMOs. From a classic standpoint, we have features ranging from tab targeting combat with set traditional character classes to a hard level cap of 50, where I imagine raids will be waiting around the corner. And from a modern standpoint, Defend the Night is looking to cure the boring questing grind by incorporating a handful of world events, which sounds similar to what you'll find in Guild Wars 2 or even Final Fantasy XIV. And these events are just available on top of really neat sounding game modes, like PvP sieges and a round-based competitive tower defense mode, where players can both build fortifications to defend their base as well as fight alongside their friendly NPCs to outlast another player doing the same thing. At the very least, it's obvious Defend the Night is trying to add new gameplay elements outside of just the stale grind, as I mentioned, so even if that grind does end up being in the game, which it doesn't sound like it will, because that is literally their main goal, to be rid of that, but even if it was, there's still a lot of content they're working on outside of just the typical leveling methods one would think of when thinking of an MMO. Now, a lot of MMOs before their release will talk about how they're bringing the swagger back to the gameplay by revamping features that have become commonized across MMOs. So if you're listening to Defend the Night's description and thinking, been here, heard that, I understand. Boy, it's hard to get hype for a new MMO, and we've had a lot of disappointments and flat-out stagnancy in the progression of this genre. So what I did is I got in touch with the dev team to go more in-depth on the information publicly available on Defend the Night, so let's jump into the interview. The first question I asked. To quote one of the points in the FAQ, Defend the Night is a dark fantasy MMORPG with a challenging return to classic gameplay that will keep you on the edge of your seat. When you say classic, are there certain games you're referencing, or a certain era of MMOs? In other words, what MMOs have you found inspiration from to create Defend the Night's core gameplay? Scribbles responded first, saying for the most part our developers and community are EverQuest fans, but we have a wide variety of favorites. We have grabbed inspiration from Ultima Online, Shadowbane, Dark Age of Camelot, Asheron's Call, WoW, and Dark Souls. Although we are paying close attention to our player base and their feedback while testing to make sure DTN is smooth, fluid, and entertaining to a newer player base, or a veteran audience that just might want things more modern. Brian also chimed in, saying, I'll also throw in one of my personal favorites, Star Wars Galaxies. What up? I love that game. That wasn't part of the quote. My next question referenced this quote. As a result, skill and knowledge will be key to surpassing your opposition. This sounds interesting. A lot of MMOs have fairly simple enemies, and as a result, the combat is mostly basic and almost too easy until you get to the much higher levels. Is the above quote hinting towards a deeper and more challenging level of complexity in enemy AI throughout the game? Scribbles said they will be evaluating this throughout testing, and they want the entire experience to be fulfilling, and Brian drove this point home. He says, we want to challenge our players from beginning to end. When we mention incorporating principles of classic MMOs, this is one of the things we're talking about. It really irritates me when games make leveling and early progression face roll easy. The world of an MMORPG is meant to feel alive and dangerous, and that's the feel we're going for with Defend the Night. Oh my gosh, Brian, I like you, man. What an awesome answer. Brian's the new Glen Coco.
Glen Coco? Fall for you, Glen Coco. You go, Glen Coco.
I mean, you MMO people, how much does the beginning stage of an MMO suck? This dev team's like, get out of here with that shit. My next question was, what would you say is the most standout way Defend the Night differentiates itself from other MMORPGs? I'd love to get an understanding of how my day in Defend the Night might differentiate from a typical day in another MMORPG. To which Brian responded, I think it's a combination of things. The progression options, city building, and return of classical elements in a modern MMO. For vertical progression, we never want our players to feel cornered into any one path. So if you enjoy a typical grinder or dungeon crawler, we've got you covered. Prefer PvP? Sure, you can burn through levels that way too. We'll also have some optional quests that can be paired with grinding or exploration, and I'm particularly excited about the event-driven progression, which will be quick, exciting scenarios that can be played solo or co-op. My next question was in regards to PvP. Will it all be consensual? And if so, are the siege events that I've heard about the primary way to engage in PvP, or will it come in other forms as well? In a nutshell, their response was yes, it has to be consensual, because there are plenty of players who don't enjoy PvP, and there are safeguards in place for both sieges as well as standard PvP in the open world. For instance, for sieges, both city leaders have to agree to warring against each other. My next question was, is there an emphasis towards PvE or PvP, or is Defend the Night aiming to achieve a balance between the two? And if a player does choose to focus on one over the other, is there a big difference in the pacing of character progression? Scribble says we will be balancing for both. For me, I always hated being locked into one style of playing or re-rolling just to PvP or PvE. There will be different paths for players to choose from based on their style of play. Some like to grind and level in one or a few different zones, some like to expand their cities and become a more renowned trade route, so it all depends on what the player wants out of Certovia. Brian followed up saying there should not be a big difference in the progression speeds, and that's one of the balance issues they'll be focusing on with early testing. My next question was based on this quote. Defend the Night aims to provide multiple options for unique, replayable, and exciting experiences to level your character. Can you elaborate a bit on what some of these options will be outside of dungeons and raids? The FAQ mentions there won't be typical fetch quests, so I'd love to hear what Defend the Night offers in place of these. Scribbles reiterated the features I mentioned earlier, being the tower defense mode, progressing via building up your city, and collecting resources for the alliances that'll be in the game, to name a few. Brian also mentioned questing, dungeon crawls, PvP, various events, so it sounds like every day in Defend the Night will be unique from the last. My next question was also in regards to a quote from the FAQ. It will be possible to solo, but Defend the Night will be a challenging game that will require specific character classes and builds to make soloing viable. And my question was, while this seems like a neat idea, to what extent would you say a healer would need to rely on other players to help them level? Is there an alternative these classes can use to level on those days where no friends are online but you want to keep progressing? Now, the dev team gave a long and informative answer to this, so again, make sure to check out the full interview. But in summation, every class should be capable of solo play. It really depends on how the player manages the character's builds, and by nature, something like a DPS class will have less trouble soloing than a healer class. But the healer can still find setups to pull off solo play. But the point of Defend the Night is there is so much going on in the world that you'll always have something that your character can not only do, but will excel at, so no fear if you don't have friends online. My next question for the devs. You mentioned how we can make our own homesteads which can grow from there. Will this be instanced or will it be a part of the world? And are these homesteads going to be what PvP sieges revolve around? We want to make the cities accessible and give each player the opportunity to own and advance their own, so the player's cities will be instanced. Instanced does not mean to say they are locked off though. Players will be able to travel to each other's cities or even become a citizen of other cities if they choose citizenship over ruling or building their own. Each player has the opportunity to start with a very basic homestead or village, and these can be advanced as a horizontal progression option. City progression can take various forms, like becoming a renowned trading post or market, living quarters for your guild, or a formidable defense structure against the dark or sieging players. Yes, PvP sieges will heavily revolve around the player cities, and players that want to participate in sieges will need to focus on fortifying their own city, as attacking others will leave them open to be attacked. The second last question I had for them. You mentioned player-created and modified environments. Will players be able to literally shape the open-world land, such as terraforming, or is this more referencing player-created dungeon instances or something of the sort? In short, the answer given was the devs love the idea of player-created content, but aren't positive on how this idea will take form yet. The devs have some pretty cool ideas that they listed for this answer though, so I'd recommend checking them out and maybe dropping a comment in their forums on what you would like to see. And the last question I had. Trying my luck here, is there a vague estimate for when you guys may release early access? Their answer is kind of no. They are having closed testing sessions this summer though, and if it isn't obvious, they really want player feedback, so go sign up for this game. It's looking it's pretty freaking awesome. I've included their register link in the description of this video. Haul ass, people! And now for my closing thoughts. The best part is, the devs are creating all of this while emphasizing over and over how much they hate pay to win. Gotta love that. And on a personal note, can we talk about these graphics? Yeah, sure, Black Desert Online came in and effed everyone's view up of what MMORPG graphics should be, because that game is beautiful. Not just these. Everything. Jiggle physics are pretty good though, gold star on the jiggle physics, but for how small of a dev team this is, and how many features they are looking to pack into this game, the fact that they can pull off this level of detail on the world and the characters is really impressive to me. If you take a look at Defend the Night's videos from a year ago compared to how it looks now, the difference is night and day. Man, I want to talk so much about this game and why I'm excited for it, but okay, damn it, look at this map. It looks so varied. great and fantastical. And why I wanted to point this out is, I found this in the lore section of the game site. They've already started working on the lore, which tells me how passionate this team is about the game. Because if they're creating a story and forming the lore already, that means they have a vision for what they want this world to be. And they want an underlying narrative available for us, so we, the players, feel like we have a purpose in doing what we are doing in-game. I mean, even the title of the game, Defend the Night, makes you think something is particularly sinister about the night cycle of the game. And the trailer reinforced that suspicion. I actually asked them about this, and apparently there's a ton of lore behind what's going on with it. So in the DNA of the game, they've ingrained a mechanic driven by lore. And you guys would be so surprised at how many MMORPGs I've played that have practically no story or narrative. And that puts a direct hit on how much the game world sucks you in, how immersed you can get. I truly believe one of the main reasons WoW is still such a prominent force in the MMORPG genre is because of Blizzard's understanding of how important the lore is to pulling people in. An MMO providing even a decent history and lore has kept me playing far longer than a game with better gameplay has. Like Terra, loved the gameplay, but the lackluster story made me feel the experience was a bit soulless. The takeaway here is, all of us MMORPG guys who are getting desperate for a new experience, this might be it. I am hyped for Defend the Night, and hopefully you guys are too. Alright guys, if you enjoyed the video, consider smacking that like button. I release MMORPG and RPG content on the regular, and I try to cover games that might not be as much in the spotlight, so if that sounds like your thing, consider also, and just equally as hard, smacking that subscribe button. I appreciate it a lot. Also, check out Defend the Night's website. I've shared what I thought would be helpful for you guys, but there is a lot more info available on the site, from the dev blogs to a forum section to news updates from the studio that discusses things going on at the studio. Alright, take care.